Drugs are bad, okay? It's Mr. Mackey from South Park. Used to love that character. He was so ridiculous. But in some ways, Mr. Mackey had it right. Are drugs really bad? Well, I don't really think you can label them bad. Drugs just are drugs. It's sort of like saying a tornado is bad. A tornado is just a tornado. I've never really been through one, so I don't know that they're bad. I think they do bad things when they hit cities and kill people. So drugs kind of the same way. Depending on your experience of drugs, what kind of drug, how often you take it, what dose you take it, and what setting, mindset, everything has a lot to do with the outcome as to whether it's going to be a good experience or a bad experience. It's well known. Habitual use of any drug will eventually work against you. In many cases, you will develop a tolerance to that drug, so you'll need more of the dose to get the same effect. And of course, you'll never get exactly the same effect as you got the first time. It's like called chasing the monkey. Heroin junkies do it all the time, trying to get that same rush they got the first time they did it. You never can achieve that. Even cannabis. The very first time I got really stoned and blitzed on a joint, never been able to duplicate the feeling of that day, that moment. And I chased my monkey for 44 years. Yeah, I was a habitual user. In the beginning, it was just small doses whenever I could get a hit and get high. That was in 1970. I progressed right on into the early 70s where I was doing it every day, all day long. By 1973, when I went in the army and went to Germany, we had hashish, plenty of hashish, $1 a gram, best hash you'll ever find. And we smoked it and ate it and used it all day long from the time I woke up to the time I passed out every night for 18 solid months overseas in the service. And then when I came back, it was just back to good old marijuana, pot, weed, and we did that all the time around the clock. So that went on in my lifetime, along with some alcohol. I was still using alcohol and weed, which is a terrible combination, by the way. I don't recommend, if you're a weed user, that you ever mix it with alcohol. I'd keep them separate. They really don't go together too well. I'm just saying. And personally, I've been off alcohol for 33 years, just celebrated my 33-year sobriety from that. So I feel accomplished and proud. But with weed, it's a different story. If you're just a casual weed user, you take a hit on a vape or a bong or something, or do a little edible a couple times a month, maybe at a party, just because you like the feeling now and then, but you're not a daily classical habitual user, this talk's not really for you. I don't have any issue or problem with that, because personally, I think that's probably healthy to use weed that way. Weed can actually be beneficial to people if it's used prudently, moderately, and with some mindfulness as to why you're using it and when you're using it and all that. But I'm speaking more to the habitual user, as I was for 44 years. Gotta have it every day, day after day. You just get the Jones almost, it's not really withdrawal, but you get really irritable and anxious when you don't have your weed. And of course, now in the days of legal weed here in Colorado, that hasn't been a problem the last 12 years. I've been stocked with as much of any kind I wanted. I'm not saying it's all been the best weed I've ever smoked in my life. Actually, the black market weed I smoked in the past, a lot of times that weed was more potent than the stuff I get, the primo stuff you get in dispensaries here in Denver. So something has changed. I mean, it's good quality stuff. It will get you high for sure, very high. But I'm just saying the quality of it, there's something about it. It's just not as good today for some reason. So I won't get into that. But today I want to give you the reasons why I quit using weed. And I gave up smoking last October 20th. That was when I got my second round of COVID and the variant, whatever. I was really, really sick for a good month, 6 weeks. Took me to start getting over it. So I gave it up that day because the coughing, the inability to breathe was just too much for me. I couldn't handle it. And I basically declared I'm never going to smoke it again. And I'm sticking with that. I will never, ever smoke weed again, ever, ever. But then on December 4th, I had a moment of clarity and I decided I don't need to do edibles and tinctures anymore either, or a patch. You don't really get too high from the patches, by the way. But the tinctures, I got pretty good buzz on, and the edibles for sure, I got high. And I gave that up too on December 4th. So I'm about, 13, 14 weeks sober now from weed. And I'll tell you why my life's gotten so much better. Here we go. Number one, there's not a list of ranking or anything, it's just what comes to mind. Number one, I sleep better. Now, I had justified all those years using weed, legal weed, for three main reasons. Gave me a better mood. Yeah, it kind of does. Makes you feel pretty good. It helped me sleep. It definitely helped me sleep at night if I did it all day long, pretty much. and it also helped with pain. It doesn't really get rid of pain like an opiate as far as deadening, numbing yourself to the pain so much, but it makes it a lot easier to tolerate any pain. And my pain levels would typically be from a 4 to a 6, 7 some days with my back issues and whatnot. So it could definitely soften that pain where I could tolerate the pain a little bit more. All right, but essentially now I sleep better because I do a fair number of herbs, melatonin, valerian, kava, these kinds of things, L-tryptophan for sleep. And I sleep really, really good now. And I dream where I remember my dreams, and they are amazing. All the years I got high on weed, I hardly ever remembered a dream. Hardly ever. And when I did remember it in the morning, it would disappear before I could get up and write it down or record it, so it was worthless. My moods have been way, way better. I've been much more upbeat waking up in the morning, more positive, more joyful about my life, my blessings, my gifts, my everything in my life. It's going pretty well overall, even with the craziness in the world today and things that aren't actually going exactly the way we would like all the time with the policies of the government. Still, I get up with less dread, less anxiety, less of a depressive feeling that I'm not a heavy depressive, but I would occasionally get a little down, or what some people might call bored, restless, irritable, moody, those kinds of things. I don't notice that so much anymore. My moods are much more stable and level. I feel much more positive. I am remembering things a whole lot better. My memory is much sharper. That's something that's well documented with cannabis. It wipes out memory. I'm not going to say it turns you into an amnesiac. It's not like that, but it definitely affects short-term memory, and short-term memory is what we build for long-term memory. And so just saying, my memory is much, much stronger and better these last few months since I quit using weed. Another thing that's been studied and is documented too with medical establishment for whatever good purpose that serves for you right now in terms of your beliefs about it. They have documented that long-term habitual use of cannabis will lower your T-cell count. T-cells are super, super important in fighting off infections, bacterial, viral infections. You want to have a strong T-cell count. Just saying, cannabis use, if you use it habitually, depresses and lowers the T-cell count. That's well been studied and documented, and I do believe that's true. Also, as far as fertility, I don't know how many of you guys out there that use weed want to be a father. Not everybody wants to be a parent, but if you do, consider this. Heavy use, habitual use of cannabis will lower your testosterone level, will affect it somewhat. I'm not saying it'll make you sterile, but it could make it a little bit harder for you to impregnate someone and to father a child. Weed has some other issues that I used to think that it made me much more creative. Well, what it actually does, it more so, this is more accurate for me anyway, it throws me back into a more of a adolescent, juvenile frame of mind where I just get a little wacky and silly, goofy. I will say things I might not ordinarily say if I was sober. It makes me a little less inhibited, in other words, which alcohol also has those qualities too, makes you less inhibited. Cannabis, certain kinds of cannabis can make you wired. If you do a lot of sativas and you're not used to it, it can make you kind of paranoid and anxious and wired. If you do indicas, it really gets you down, man, guy, yeah. And a sativa will kind of be somewhere in the middle, just depending on your tolerance, how your body endocannabinoid receptors relate to the cannabis weed. Mine always seemed to enjoy it because I always found I felt very pleasurable when I used weed. However, I also look at this. It's not cheap. I was spending upwards of $300 to $350 a month on my weed habit over the last 8-10 years. It had greatly increased in 2010 when I first got my medical marijuana card, as they call it. And then I just started going off the charts, buying all kinds of products, different kinds of weed, buds, hash, wax, solvents, vaporizer pens, all kinds of goodies, edibles, tinctures, gummies. I had them all, and I used it all day long. And I justified it. I made tons of videos on social media and YouTube included, and also I promoted it as if it was a smart thing to do. Folks, it definitely impairs your judgment when you use it habitually all the time. I'm not going to say it'll turn you into a serial killer. Obviously, weed doesn't do that. It doesn't make most people violent, but it can make you a little bit low in your judgment, ability to discern things properly. Now, I was able to always drive fine on weed because I drove extra slow when I was high. I tend to drive faster when I'm not high, many times, but when I was stoned or high on weed, I would always slow it down, stick to the speed limit, or even go under the speed limit. And so that's why, I was accustomed to driving high, and I did it for all these years, never got a DUI or anything like that. But I was very thankful because I've been stopped a couple times for speeding or for warnings when I was high. I just was able to mask it and they never knew. I worked at the post office for all the years. The last 20 years I worked there, I was high every day and nobody ever really knew except the ones that occasionally smell the edibles on my breath. Coworkers would say, "Oh man, you're using some weed today." I go, "Oh, you can tell? Yeah, man, I can smell it on your breath." Oh. But, I smoked at work. I used to go out in my car on my breaks. I sometimes smoked vaporizer pens in the bathroom there at the post office. And of course, I did edibles all the time. And this is common in society today. People are out there buzzed, high on weed all the time. And most of the time, you just sort of accept that's how that person is. You wouldn't recognize that they're a stoner if their eyes aren't all glazed over and they're talking super slow and laughing a lot. Well, that's kind of a giveaway. It's more indicative of somebody who's not used it much. But habitual users, just like habitual alcoholics, have a way to cover it up where you probably can't really tell they're high. Weed also affects the lungs. The lung tissue takes a beating. Now, it's not carcinogenic, so I've checked out good with any x-ray I've ever had. I've checked out fine. No signs of any lung issues yet. But I did notice that over the years, I had bronchial issues a lot more coughs. I'd get viruses, things like that. I'd go to a bad cough. I had pneumonia, had COVID twice. And, my lungs have taken a beating. And these alveoli, they're very sensitive little membranes in your lungs. They're not meant to have foreign vapors like cannabis smoke, hot smoke coming into them. And especially if you hold your hits. I don't recommend holding hits. If you're taking a cannabis hit, even for a casual user, just take your hit, hold it for a second, breathe it out. Breathe it out slow, but breathe it out. Don't sit there and hold it for 5-10 seconds like they told us in the old days to do. You definitely get higher the more you hold it in. You'll get more stoned, but it's really, really damaging and bad for your lungs. I don't recommend that. Take it from someone who smoked for 44 years. 5 years of cigarettes before that. That's enough. Almost 50 years of smoking fumes into my lungs. And I think in terms of energy, I know I have a ton more energy now that I'm not getting high every day. Weed can kind of pick you up if you do a sativa and you get that buzz, and after a little while you feel like you got some energy. It's misleading. You don't really have more energy. You're just really stoked and high, dude or dudette. That's all it is. So that's my wrap up here. There probably are some other things that I just can't think of right now. But in terms of, the munchies and all that, yeah, getting stoned and high a lot gave me the munchies big time, where I would snack on sweets and crunchies and things that really aren't super healthy that I really didn't need or want. But my brain gets tricked being high, and it creates that effect of you want to eat something, and especially sweets seem to be the thing people crave, at least for me. And so I put on a little bit of weight at times. I had to kind of hustle and work to try to burn those calories off, those pounds off. And basically I don't do that anymore. I don't do any late night snacking now, and I go to bed. My digestion's a lot better. I just get up feeling more normal and balanced. And everything's just working so much better now that as much as I enjoyed weed for 44 years, that's 44 years, daily, all day using weed, I could not be happier now being off weed and not using it anymore. And I don't plan to ever again. I always say never, so I would never say that I would never ever in my life take an edible again. But the odds of me doing that are so unlikely because, like a lot of habitual users, one dose and I can have that craving come back and want to start doing it again every day very quickly. It's not a physical addiction. It is a psychological addiction, but it's very, very strong. This psychological addiction is very, very powerful. So it's up to you whether you want to keep using weed every day if you're a daily user, but I'd recommend giving it a break. Try the 3 months that I did. Go off it for 3 months and then come back and tell me if you want to use it again. I did the same experiment with watching television. Once I gave up watching regular TV for 1 month, let alone 3 months, I never wanted to go back to watching TV. And if you go off weed, you might be surprised that you might not really want to be using it as much as you think. All right, friends, be well. Namaste.